The crystal towers of Valdoria Prime reached into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Princess Zara stood at the window of her chamber, watching ships from a dozen worlds land in the royal spaceport below. Today was her wedding day, and she felt nothing but cold duty in her heart. Her father, Emperor Thane, had arranged this marriage to secure a trade deal with the humans. The Valdorian Empire controlled the richest mining systems in this sector of the galaxy. The humans wanted access to their rare crystals. In exchange, they offered technology and resources that Valdoria barely needed. Zara touched the smooth crystal skin of her arm. Like all Valdorians, she could read minds and speak without words. Her people were tall, strong, and beautiful. They lived for thousands of years and commanded respect throughout the known galaxy. Humans, by comparison, were short-lived creatures who had only recently learned to travel between stars. The door to her chamber slid open. Her personal guard, Captain Voss, entered with quick steps. "Princess, your husband has arrived," Voss said. His mental voice carried disapproval. "The human delegation just landed." Zara turned from the window. "What is he like?" Voss paused. "Ordinary. Very ordinary. He seems nervous and keeps looking around like he has never seen a proper palace before. He carries books instead of weapons. The other humans treat him with respect, but he does not look like a warrior or a leader." "Books?" Zara raised an eyebrow. "What kind of books?" "History, philosophy, poetry, human literature. He was reading during the entire flight here, according to our spies in his delegation." Zara walked to her mirror and checked her appearance. Her crystal skin glowed with a soft blue light, and her silver hair fell in perfect waves to her shoulders. She wore the traditional royal wedding gown of her people, made from living crystal that shifted colors with her emotions. Right now, it showed deep blues and grays, reflecting her uncertainty. "Have you tried to read his mind?" she asked. Voss shook his head. "Humans have strange mental barriers. Their thoughts are muddy and hard to understand. This one seems especially closed off, but from what I can sense, he appears calm. Almost too calm for someone about to marry into the most powerful family in the galaxy." An hour later, Zara stood in the great hall of the palace. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the massive space. The ceiling rose so high that clouds formed near the top. Waterfalls of liquid crystal flowed down the walls, filling the air with music as they fell. Emperor Thane sat on his throne at the far end of the hall. His crystal skin was darker than Zara's, aged to a deep purple after 3,000 years of life. His mental voice could crush weaker minds, and his physical strength could break steel. He was everything a Valdorian ruler should be. The human delegation entered through the main doors. They looked small and fragile compared to the other guests. Their leader was an older woman named Ambassador Collins. She walked with confidence, but even she seemed impressed by the grandeur around her. Behind her came Jake Morrison. Zara studied her future husband as he walked toward the throne. He was average height for a human, maybe 6 feet tall. His brown hair was neat, but not styled in any particular way. He wore a simple black suit that fit well but was not expensive. His face was pleasant but unremarkable. He looked like he could be a teacher or a clerk, not the husband of a galactic princess. But there was something about the way he moved that caught her attention. His steps were measured and sure. He did not gawk at the crystal waterfalls or the floating gardens like the other humans. His eyes moved constantly, taking in details, but he did not seem nervous or overwhelmed. When he reached the center of the hall, Jake stopped and bowed deeply to Emperor Thane. The bow was perfect, showing exactly the right amount of respect without appearing weak. "Your Majesty," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "I am honored to join your family and our peoples together." Emperor Thane studied the human for a long moment. His mental probe pushed against Jake's mind, testing his defenses. Zara watched her father's expression change slightly. Surprise, confusion. "Welcome to Valdoria, human," the Emperor said finally. "You seem different from what I expected." Jake smiled. It was a warm, genuine expression that changed his entire face. "I hope that's a good thing, Your Majesty." The wedding ceremony began. Ancient words in the Valdorian language echoed through the hall as the royal priests performed rituals that had not changed in 10,000 years. Jake spoke his vows in careful but correct Valdorian, clearly having studied the language extensively. When it came time for the mental bond, the most sacred part of Valdorian marriage, Zara reached out with her thoughts to touch Jake's mind. Every Valdorian couple shared this moment of complete mental unity, but Jake's mind was like a wall of smooth metal. She could sense that something was there, but she could not penetrate his mental defenses. In 300 years of life, she had never encountered a mind she could not at least partially read. Jake seemed to sense her confusion. He leaned close during the final blessing and whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, some things are worth waiting to discover." The ceremony concluded with the traditional exchange of gifts. Emperor Thane presented Jake with a crystal blade, a weapon that could cut through any known material. Jake accepted it with proper reverence, but Zara noticed he held it like someone who already knew weapons very well. Jake's gift to the royal family was more unusual. He presented Emperor Thane with a small, plain wooden box. "This contains soil from Earth," Jake explained, "from the place where I grew up. It's not valuable in terms of money, but it represents my commitment to making this new world my home." The crowd murmured politely, but Zara could sense their thoughts. They found the gift simple and crude compared to the crystal blade. But something about Jake's explanation bothered her. He spoke about the soil like it was more important than he was letting on. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the royal gardens. Beings from dozens of worlds mingled and shared food and drinks. Jake moved through the crowd with surprising ease, speaking to ambassadors and nobles as if he had been doing it his whole life. Zara watched him from across the garden. He was talking to the Krillian trade representative, a massive reptilian creature known for his aggressive personality. But instead of being intimidated, Jake seemed completely relaxed. He even made the Krillian laugh, something she had never seen before. "Your husband is not what he appears," said a voice behind her. Zara turned to see her cousin, Prince Davin. He was one of the most powerful telepaths in their family, capable of reading thoughts from great distances. "What do you mean?" she asked. Davin's crystal skin flickered with orange patterns, a sign of deep concern. "I have been trying to scan him all evening. His mind is completely shielded. No human should be able to block Valdorian telepathy so completely. It's impossible unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless he's been trained specifically to do it. But why would humans train their diplomats to resist telepathy? And more importantly, what else might they have trained him to do?" Zara looked back at Jake. He was now talking to a group of Xantharian merchants, beings who were notoriously difficult to deal with, but they seemed to hang on his every word. For the first time since learning about her arranged marriage, Princess Zara felt genuinely curious about her new husband. Jake Morrison was clearly much more than the simple human diplomat he pretended to be. She just had no idea how much more. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Zara found herself growing more puzzled by her husband every day. Jake had settled into palace life with an ease that surprised everyone. He woke early each morning to read in the library, spent afternoons walking in the gardens, and attended every formal dinner and ceremony with perfect manners. But there were small things that didn't make sense. This morning, Zara watched Jake from their balcony as he walked through the lower gardens. The palace guards who patrolled that area always seemed to relax when he approached. They would nod respectfully and move on to other duties, as if his presence made their job unnecessary. "Jake," she called down to him, "come have breakfast with me." He looked up and waved, then walked toward the palace entrance. But instead of taking the main stairs that all visitors used, he headed toward a side door that led to the restricted service levels. Zara frowned. That door required special clearance codes that only senior palace staff possessed. A few minutes later, Jake appeared on their balcony, carrying a tray of fresh fruit and tea. "How did you get up here so quickly?" Zara asked. "And where did you get the food?" Jake set the tray down and poured tea for both of them. "I took a shortcut through the service levels. The kitchen staff were happy to prepare something for us." "The service levels require clearance codes." "Do they? I must have gotten lucky. Maybe someone left a door open." Zara studied his face. Jake's expression was calm and innocent, but she sensed he was not telling her everything. She tried again to read his thoughts, pushing harder with her telepathic abilities than she ever had before. But his mental shields remained completely solid. "Jake, what did you do before you became a diplomat?" He smiled and handed her a cup of tea. "I was a student. History and languages, mostly. Pretty boring stuff." "Where did you study?" "A small college back on Earth. You probably never heard of it." Before Zara could ask more questions, her personal communicator chimed. Captain Voss's voice came through the device. "Princess, your presence is requested in the throne room immediately. The Krillian ambassador has arrived with an urgent message." Zara sighed. Political meetings were the worst part of being royalty. "Come with me," she said to Jake. "Father likes having you at these meetings." They walked together through the palace corridors toward the throne room. Jake seemed to know the way perfectly, even though they had never taken this particular route before. When they passed security checkpoints, the guards waved them through without scanning their identification codes. This was normal for Zara, but Jake was supposed to be checked each time. The throne room was filled with tension when they arrived. Ambassador Krell, the Krillian representative, stood before Emperor Thane's throne. Krell was 8 feet tall with dark green scales and razor-sharp teeth. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their aggressive nature and military might. "Your Majesty," Krell said, his voice like grinding stone, "I bring word from the Krillian High Command. Our war fleets are moving toward this system. They will arrive in 7 days." Emperor Thane's crystal skin darkened to deep red. "For what purpose?" "We have no quarrel with the Krillian Empire. War Chief Vextar has decided he wants Princess Zara as his mate. He offers a simple trade: give him the princess, and our fleets will turn around. Refuse, and we will take her by force after we destroy your military." The throne room erupted in angry voices. Valdorian nobles shouted insults at the ambassador while palace guards moved their hands to their weapons. But Krell just stood there calmly, confident in his superior firepower. "This is outrageous," Prince Davin called out. "Princess Zara is already married." Krell's massive head turned toward Jake. "To this soft human? Vextar does not consider humans to be real competition. Your princess needs a strong mate who can protect her, not a weak scholar who reads books all day." Zara felt anger rise in her chest. Whatever mysteries surrounded Jake, he was still her husband. "I choose my own fate," she declared. "I will not be traded like cargo." "Then you choose war," Krell replied. "Vextar's fleet will arrive in 7 days. You have until then to reconsider." The ambassador turned and walked toward the exit. But as he passed Jake, something unexpected happened. Jake stepped slightly to one side, moving into Krell's path. It looked like an accident, but the timing was perfect. "Excuse me, Ambassador," Jake said politely. "I wanted to ask you something before you leave." Krell stopped and looked down at the much smaller human. "What?" "I'm curious about Krillian military tactics. Do you always announce your attacks in advance? It seems like it would give your enemies time to prepare." Several people in the room gasped. Questioning Krillian military methods was considered deeply insulting, but Jake's tone was so innocent and curious that it almost sounded like an honest question from someone who didn't understand warfare. Krell's eyes narrowed. Humans know nothing of real combat. We announce our intentions because we are confident in our strength. Fear is a weapon, just like guns and bombs. That's fascinating, Jake replied. But what if your enemies aren't afraid? What if they use your advance warning to set traps or call for help from allies? Impossible. No one in this sector has the military strength to stand against a Krillian war fleet. Jake nodded thoughtfully. You're probably right. I don't know much about military matters. I was just curious. But Zara noticed something strange in Jake's voice when he said those last words. There was a tone underneath the polite curiosity that she couldn't identify. It almost sounded like amusement. Krell continued toward the exit, but he seemed less confident than before. Jake's innocent questions had pointed out a real weakness in the Krillian strategy. By announcing their attack, they had given their enemies time to prepare. After the ambassador left, Emperor Thane slumped in his throne. 7 days, he muttered. Our military cannot stand against a full Krillian war fleet. What about our allies? Prince Davon asked. The Xantharians? The Altarians? Too far away. And even if they came, it would not be enough. The Krillians have been building their fleet for decades. Jake raised his hand politely. Your Majesty, may I make a suggestion? Emperor Thane looked at him with surprise. You have military advice? Human. Not military advice exactly. But I know something about human diplomatic procedures. If this war chief wants to challenge Princess Zara's marriage, human custom requires him to face her current husband in combat first. The room fell silent. Several nobles began laughing. Combat? Prince Davon chuckled. Jake, you're a scholar. Vextar is the greatest warrior in the Krillian Empire. He has killed hundreds of enemies in single combat. Jake shrugged. I know it sounds crazy, but according to human law, he can't claim a married woman without defeating her husband first. If I challenge him to single combat, he'll have to accept or lose face with his own people? Emperor Thane stared at Jake for a long moment. Even if that's true, you would be killed instantly. How does that help anyone? Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But it would buy us time. While Vexatar is preparing for the combat, you could contact your allies or find other solutions. Zara grabbed Jake's arm. This is insane. I won't let you throw your life away for political reasons. Jake turned to look at her, and for just a moment, she saw something different in his eyes. They were still kind and warm, but there was a depth there that she had never noticed before. A confidence that seemed completely at odds with his mild personality. Don't worry about me, he said softly. I'm tougher than I look. That evening, Zara found Jake in their private chambers, reading a book about Valdorian history. She sat down beside him on their crystalline couch. You can't seriously be planning to fight Vexatar, she said. Jake closed his book and set it aside. Why not? Because he'll kill you in seconds. Krillians are twice as strong as Valdorians, and we're much stronger than humans. Physical strength isn't everything in a fight. Jake, this isn't a game. Vextar has been trained to kill since he was a child. He's fought in dozens of wars. You're a diplomat who reads poetry. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the palace grounds. Can I tell you something, Zara? But you have to promise to keep it secret. Of course. I wasn't entirely honest about my background. I did study history and languages, but that wasn't all I did. I also learned other skills. What kind of skills? Jake turned back to her. The kind that might help me survive a fight with a Krillian war chief. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the palace alarm system began sounding. Captain Voss's voice came over the communication system. All citizens to emergency stations. Unknown ships have entered the system. They are not responding to our signals. Jake's expression immediately changed. The mild, scholarly look vanished, replaced by something cold and focused. "They're early," he said quietly. "What?" "The Krillians. They said 7 days, but they're here now. It's a classic intimidation tactic. Arrive early to catch your enemies unprepared." Zara stared at him. "How do you know that?" Jake was already moving toward their equipment storage. "Because it's exactly what I would do." The Krillian war fleet hung in space like a collection of dark daggers pointed at Valdoria Prime. 50 massive ships surrounded the planet, their weapons charged and ready. The largest ship, Vextar's flagship, was twice the size of anything in the Valdorian Navy. In the palace throne room, Emperor Thane faced the reality of his situation. His own fleet was outnumbered 5-1. His allies were too far away to help, and now Vextar himself was demanding to come down to the planet's surface. "He wants to settle this personally," Captain Voss reported. "Single combat between him and Princess Zara's husband, just as the human suggested." Emperor Thane looked across the room at Jake, who stood quietly beside Zara. The human looked calm, almost relaxed. It was disturbing how little fear he showed. "This is madness," the Emperor said. "Vextar will tear you apart." Jake stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I formally request permission to accept this challenge. It's my right as Princess Zara's husband to defend her honor. And it's my right as her father to protect her from becoming a widow. With respect, sir, what choice do we have? If I don't fight him, he'll take her anyway after he destroys your planet." Prince Davon moved closer to his uncle's throne. "Father, perhaps we should consider surrender. Zara would still be alive, even if she's married to that monster." Zara's crystal skin flashed bright red with anger. "I would rather die than be given to Vextar like a prize. And I would rather die than let that happen," Jake added quietly. Something in his voice made everyone in the room look at him more carefully. There was a certainty there that seemed strange coming from someone about to face impossible odds. Emperor Thane studied Jake for a long moment. "Very well. I will allow this combat. But know that when you die, I will have no choice but to surrender my daughter to save my people." "I understand, Your Majesty." 2 hours later, the royal arena was filled to capacity. Beings from across the galaxy had come to witness what everyone assumed would be a very short fight. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering, with crystal walls that could withstand weapons fire and a floor that could be configured for any type of combat. Vextar's shuttle landed in the center of the arena. The Krillian war chief emerged to the sound of his own warriors cheering from the stands. He stood 9 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that looked like natural armor. His claws were as long as knives, and his teeth could bite through steel. Scars covered his body from hundreds of previous battles. "Where is this human who thinks he can face me?" Vextar roared. His voice carried across the arena without amplification. Jake entered through the opposite gate. He wore simple combat clothing, black pants, and a black shirt. No armor, no visible weapons. He looked tiny compared to his opponent. The crowd fell silent. Many had expected Jake to at least wear protective gear or carry some kind of advanced human weapon. Instead, he looked like he was dressed for a casual workout. Vextar laughed when he saw Jake. "This is what Valdorian royalty marries? This soft little creature?" Jake walked to the center of the arena without responding. Up close, the size difference was even more dramatic. Vextar could have picked Jake up with one hand. The arena's main screen displayed the combat rules. This was a fight to the death or surrender. No weapons were allowed except natural ones. The combat would continue until one fighter could no longer continue. "Last chance to surrender, human," Vextar growled. "I might let you live if you beg properly." Jake looked up at the massive alien. "Thank you for the offer. I'll pass." Zara watched from the royal viewing box, her heart pounding. She had tried one more time to read Jake's thoughts before the combat began, pushing her telepathic abilities to their absolute limit. For just a moment, she thought she sensed something. Not thoughts exactly, but a feeling. Jake was not afraid. He was excited. The combat began with a horn blast that echoed through the arena. Vextar immediately charged forward, his massive claws extended. He moved with surprising speed for such a large creature, closing the distance to Jake in seconds. Jake seemed to panic. He stumbled backward, barely avoiding the first swipe of Vextar's claws. The tips of the claws passed inches from his face. The crowd murmured with disappointment. It was going to be over quickly. Vextar pressed his attack, slashing and grabbing at Jake with both hands. But somehow, Jake kept avoiding the attacks. He stumbled, rolled, and scrambled around the arena floor like a terrified animal. "Stand still and die with dignity!" Vextar roared in frustration. Jake continued to run and dodge. He looked clumsy and desperate. Several times he nearly tripped over his own feet. The audience began to lose interest. This wasn't a fight. It was just a prolonged execution. But in the royal viewing box, Zara began to notice something strange. Jake's movements looked random and panicked. But he was never actually in serious danger. Every stumble seemed to happen at exactly the right moment. Every desperate roll took him just far enough away from Vextar's attacks. Prince Davin leaned over to whisper in her ear, "Your husband is more clever than I thought. He's wearing Vextar down." Zara looked more carefully. Davin was right. Vextar was breathing heavily now. His attacks were getting slower and less precise. Jake, despite all his running and rolling, still seemed fresh. "He's studying him," Zara realized. "Jake isn't just avoiding the attacks, he's learning how Vextar fights." For 10 minutes, the chase continued around the arena. Vextar grew more and more frustrated as his claws found nothing but air. His roars of anger echoed off the crystal walls. Finally, Vextar stopped in the center of the arena. "Enough!" he bellowed. "I'm tired of chasing you around like a mouse. Fight me properly or I'll finish this now." Jake stopped running. He stood about 20 feet away from Vextar, breathing hard but not exhausted. "Okay," he said simply. "Let's fight properly." Something in Jake's tone made the entire arena fall silent. The mild, scholarly voice was gone. In its place was something cold and confident. Vextar charged one final time, putting all his remaining strength into a devastating attack that would have torn Jake in half. But Jake was no longer where Vextar expected him to be. In a movement too fast for most eyes to follow, Jake stepped to the side and grabbed Vextar's extended arm. Using the Krillian's own momentum, Jake spun and threw the massive warrior across the arena. Vextar hit the crystal wall with a sound like thunder. Cracks appeared in the reinforced structure. The Krillian war chief slid to the ground and struggled to get back to his feet. The arena was completely silent. No one could believe what they had just seen. Vextar charged again, but this time Jake didn't run. He met the attack head-on. His movements were precise and economical, like a master craftsman at work. He ducked under Vextar's claws and struck the Krillian in the chest with the palm of his hand. The blow sounded like a gunshot. Vextar staggered backward, his armor cracked where Jake had hit him. "Impossible," someone in the crowd whispered. Jake pressed his attack. He moved around Vextar like water, striking precise blows that seemed to do far more damage than they should. Each hit was perfectly placed to cause maximum effect. Vextar tried to grab Jake, but the human seemed to flow through his fingers. When the Krillian swung his massive fists, Jake was always somewhere else. Within minutes, it was clear that the fight had completely reversed. Vextar was bleeding from a dozen places where Jake's strikes had found gaps in his natural armor. The Krillian war chief was breathing heavily and moving slowly, while Jake looked like he had barely begun to fight. "Who are you?" Vexatar gasped as he stumbled backward from another perfectly placed strike. Jake paused in his attack. "I'm Princess Zara's husband. That's all you need to know." Vextar made one last desperate attempt to win. He lunged forward with both claws extended, putting everything he had into a final attack. Jake caught both of Vexatar's wrists in his hands and held them motionless. The muscles in Jake's arms stood out like steel cables, but he showed no strain as he held back the massive alien's attack. "It's over," Jake said quietly. "Surrender now, and I'll let you leave with your honor intact." Vexatar stared into Jake's eyes and saw something there that made his blood run cold. This human was holding back. Everything he had seen so far was just a fraction of what Jake was capable of. "I yield," Vexatar said through gritted teeth. Jake released his wrists and stepped back. "Good choice." The arena exploded in shocked cheers and confused murmurs. Beings throughout the galaxy would be talking about this fight for years to come. But as Jake walked toward the exit, Emperor Thane's voice echoed through the arena's speakers. "Wait." Jake stopped and looked up at the royal viewing box. "I cannot allow a being of unknown capabilities to remain married to my daughter," Emperor Thane declared. "Guards, arrest the human. We need to find out what he really is." 50 of the palace's elite guards surrounded Jake in the arena. Their weapons were drawn and their crystal armor gleamed in the arena lights. These were the most skilled warriors in the Valdorian Empire. Jake looked around at the circle of armed guards. Then he looked up at Emperor Thane. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "I really wish you hadn't done that." The arena fell silent as 50 elite Valdorian guards surrounded Jake. Their crystal weapons hummed with deadly energy, and their armor was designed to withstand attacks from the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Each guard was a veteran warrior who had fought in countless battles across the stars. Jake stood in the center of their circle, completely calm. He looked around at the weapons pointed at him and sighed. "Captain Voss," he called out to the guard commander, "are you sure about this? I just defeated Vexatar to protect your princess. Doesn't that count for something?" Captain Voss kept his weapon trained on Jake's chest. "You're not what you claim to be, human. Emperor Thane wants answers and he'll get them." "Fair enough," Jake said, "but I tried to do this the easy way." In the royal viewing box, Zara watched with growing horror. "Father, stop this madness. Jake just saved our world from invasion. He also just proved he's been lying to us from the beginning," Emperor Thane replied. "No ordinary human could have done what he did down there. I want to know what we're really dealing with." Prince Davin leaned forward in his seat. "Uncle, perhaps we should talk to him first, before using force." "The time for talk is over." Captain Voss raised his weapon. "Surrender peacefully, human, and you won't be harmed." Jake's response was barely a whisper, but somehow everyone in the arena heard it clearly. "I can't do that." What happened next would be talked about throughout the galaxy for generations. Jake moved. He didn't run or attack or try to escape. He simply moved through the circle of guards like they were standing still. One moment he was surrounded by 50 armed warriors, and the next moment he was standing behind them while they spun around in confusion. "Where did he go?" one of the guards shouted. "Behind you," Jake said calmly. The guards turned and fired their weapons at once. 50 beams of crystal energy converged on Jake's position with enough force to destroy a small building. But Jake was no longer there. He appeared beside the nearest guard and touched the warrior's weapon. The crystal rifle simply stopped working. Not broken or damaged. It just went dead, as if someone had turned off a switch. Jake moved to the next guard, then the next. Each time he touched a weapon, it became useless. He moved so fast that the guards couldn't track him with their eyes. Within seconds, all 50 weapons were dead. "Impossible," Captain Voss breathed. "Crystal technology doesn't just stop working." Jake stood in the center of the arena again, surrounded by guards holding useless weapons. His eyes had changed. There was a faint glow behind them, like light reflecting off metal. "Your turn," he said quietly. The guards dropped their weapons and attacked with their bare hands. They were trained in dozens of combat forms and enhanced with Valdorian strength that could crush stone. 50 of them against one human should have ended in seconds. Instead, Jake moved through them like wind through grass. He never struck to kill or seriously injure. Instead, his touches seemed to simply turn off their ability to fight. A tap on a pressure point here, a precise strike there, and each guard would collapse unconscious to the arena floor. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the most elite warriors in the Valdorian Empire fell one by one. Jake's movements were like nothing they had ever seen. He seemed to know exactly where each guard would be before they moved there. Within 2 minutes, 50 unconscious guards lay scattered around the arena floor. Jake stood alone in the center, not even breathing hard. The silence stretched on for long seconds. Then Vextar, who had been watching from the edge of the arena, began to laugh. "Now I understand," the Krillian war chief said. "You were never in danger during our fight. You could have finished me in the first 10 seconds. Jake looked over at him. "Probably less than that." "What are you?" Before Jake could answer, Emperor Thane's voice boomed across the arena. "Guards, seal all exits. No one leaves until I have answers." Heavy blast doors began closing around the arena. The crowd murmured nervously as they realized they were being trapped inside with whatever Jake really was. Jake looked up at the royal viewing box. The mild expression was completely gone from his face. In its place was something cold and dangerous. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the arena, "I strongly suggest you reconsider that order. You're trapped, human. Whatever you are, you can't fight an entire planet." Jake smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Want to bet?" He raised his right hand and pointed one finger at the blast doors that were sealing the arena. A beam of pure white light shot from his fingertip and struck the massive door. The reinforced metal, designed to withstand nuclear weapons, simply vaporized. The crowd gasped. Several alien ambassadors immediately activated emergency communicators to contact their homeworlds. Whatever was happening here, the galaxy needed to know about it. Jake pointed at the other doors around the arena. One by one, they disappeared in flashes of white light. "Now," Jake said, looking back up at Emperor Thane, "shall we discuss this like civilized beings?" In the royal viewing box, Zara stared at her husband in shock. The man she had married, the quiet scholar who read poetry and walked in gardens, was revealing capabilities that defied everything she thought she knew about humans. "Jake," she called down to him, "what are you?" He looked up at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "I'm still your husband, Zara. That part was never a lie. But the rest?" Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, as if making a decision he had been avoiding for months. "My name is Jake Morrison, and I am a guardian of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I was sent here to protect human interests in this sector and to assess potential threats to our colonies." The arena erupted in shocked voices. Several alien ambassadors were already heading for the exits that Jake had opened. "The humans have been spying on us?" Prince Davin demanded. "Not spying," Jake replied. "Protecting. There's a difference." Emperor Thane's crystal skin had turned almost black with rage. "You married my daughter under false pretenses. You infiltrated my palace and my family." "I married your daughter because my government asked me to, and because establishing a relationship with Valdoria was important for human security in this region. But my feelings for her became real very quickly." Jake looked directly at Zara as he spoke. "Everything between us has been genuine, even if I couldn't tell you the whole truth about what I am." "What you are?" Zara asked. "What does that mean?" Jake raised his hand again. The same white light appeared around his fingers, but this time he shaped it into complex patterns in the air. The light formed symbols and equations that hung in space like holographic displays. Humans have been modifying themselves for space travel and colonization for over a century, he explained. The Guardian program represents the current peak of that development. Enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and intelligence. Built-in weapons and defensive systems. Complete mental shielding against telepathic species. He gestured at the unconscious guards around him. We're designed to protect human colonies from exactly the kind of threats that Vextar and his fleet represented. How many of you are there? Emperor Thane demanded. Enough. That's not an answer. Jake's expression hardened again. Your Majesty, with respect, that's all the answer you're going to get. What you need to understand is that humanity is not the weak, primitive species you thought we were. We've been working very hard to make sure you continued thinking that. Vexitar, who had been listening carefully to this exchange, suddenly began backing toward the nearest exit. Where are you going, War Chief? Jake called out. This changes everything, Vextar replied. If humans have warriors like you, then our intelligence about your species is completely wrong. I need to report this to my government immediately. Actually, Jake said quietly, I'm afraid I can't let you do that. The white light appeared around Jake's entire body now, brighter than before. When he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of someone used to making decisions about life and death. Vextar, you have two choices. You can swear an oath never to reveal what you've seen here today, or you can try to leave this planet and see what happens. The Krillian war chief stopped moving. You would threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining the situation. Human security depends on other species continuing to underestimate us. You've seen too much to be allowed to report back to your government. And if I refuse your oath? Jake's smile was cold as winter. Then you'll discover that I have capabilities I haven't shown you yet. The arena had fallen completely silent. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. I need to speak with my husband privately, Zara announced suddenly. She stood up in the royal viewing box and activated the platform that would lower her to the arena floor. As it descended, she kept her eyes locked on Jake's face. Clear the arena, she commanded. Everyone out, now. Slowly, the crowd began to file out through the exits Jake had opened. Vexitar hesitated for a moment, then followed the others. Even Emperor Thane and Prince Davin left, though they clearly didn't want to. Within minutes, Zara and Jake were alone in the vast arena. Now, Zara said as she walked toward him, tell me the truth, all of it. Jake stood in the center of the empty arena, the white light fading from around his body. For the first time since the fighting began, he looked uncertain. Facing Zara's questions seemed harder for him than fighting 50 armed guards. The truth, he said quietly. Where do I even begin? Zara walked closer until she was standing just a few feet away from him. Start with who you really are. Jake nodded slowly. My real name is Jake Morrison. That part was true. But I wasn't born on a farm in Kansas like I told everyone. I was born in a facility called Site 7, deep underground beneath the Colorado mountains. He sat down on one of the stone benches that ringed the arena floor. Zara sat beside him, close enough to touch but keeping some distance. Site 7 is where the Guardian program creates and trains people like me. We're not exactly human anymore, though we started that way. Enhanced genetics, cybernetic implants, neural modifications. By the time the process is complete, we're designed to be the perfect deep-cover operatives. How many of you are there? About 300 active Guardians spread throughout the galaxy, each one placed in a position where they can protect human interests or gather intelligence about potential threats. Zara tried to process this information. So our entire marriage was just an assignment for you? Jake was quiet for a long moment. It started that way. The Strategic Command identified Valdoria as a potential threat to human expansion in this sector. Your father's empire controls key resources and shipping lanes. If he decided to move against human colonies, it could have been devastating. So they sent you to marry me and spy on us. They sent me to establish a relationship that would give us early warning if Valdoria planned any aggressive action. The marriage was supposed to be a political arrangement that would benefit both sides. Zara's crystal skin flickered with hurt and anger. But it was all fake. No. Jake turned to look at her directly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It was supposed to be fake, but it became real very quickly. My feelings for you are genuine, Zara. That was never part of the mission. How can I believe anything you say now? Jake stood up and walked a few steps away. Because I'm about to tell you things that will probably end my career and possibly get me executed for treason. He turned back to face her. The Guardian program isn't just about defense, Zara. We're also weapons. Each Guardian is capable of single-handedly destroying entire military installations or assassinating key leaders. We're designed to operate independently for years at a time, building relationships and gathering intelligence until we're activated. Activated? Given orders to eliminate specific threats to human expansion. The program's ultimate goal is to ensure that humanity becomes the dominant species in the galaxy, no matter what it takes. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. And was my family on that list? Yes. The simple word hung in the air between them like a knife. 3 weeks ago, I received orders to eliminate your father and brother if they proceeded with their plans to form a military alliance with the Xantharian Empire. Strategic Command viewed that alliance as a direct threat to human colonies in the Outer Rim. Zara's hand moved instinctively to the ceremonial blade at her side. Are you here to kill us? No. I sent a message back to Strategic Command telling them that the intelligence was wrong and that Valdoria represented no threat to human interests. I recommended that they focus their attention elsewhere. Was the intelligence wrong? Jake looked uncomfortable. Not entirely. Your father was considering the alliance. But after living here for 3 months and getting to know your family, I realized that the threat was minimal. Your father is cautious and defensive, not aggressive. He would never attack human colonies unless he was directly threatened. So you disobeyed your orders. I altered my mission parameters based on new intelligence. That's within my authority as a Guardian. But when I received the follow-up orders yesterday, I crossed a line that I can't uncross. What follow-up orders? Jake's expression darkened. Strategic Command has decided that having a Guardian revealed in such a public way is unacceptable. They're sending a strike team to eliminate everyone who witnessed what happened today. That includes you, your family, Vex Tar, and about 3,000 other beings. Zara stared at him in horror. They would commit genocide to protect their secret? The Guardian program is humanity's greatest strategic advantage. If other species learn about our true capabilities, it could trigger a galactic war that would destroy us all. From Strategic Command's perspective, a few thousand lives is a small price to pay for the security of billions of humans. And you're telling me this because I've decided that some things are more important than human security, like the lives of innocent people, like my marriage to someone I've come to love. Jake activated a small device on his wrist. Holographic displays appeared in the air between them, showing star charts and fleet movements. The strike team will arrive in 18 hours. One stealth ship with a crew of 12 Guardians and enough firepower to destroy this entire planet. They'll make it look like a reactor accident or a natural disaster. Can we stop them? We can try. But first you need to understand something else. I'm not the only Guardian who has been having second thoughts about the program. The holographic display shifted to show communication logs and encrypted messages. There are dozens of us throughout the galaxy who believe that Strategic Command has gone too far. We've been secretly coordinating for months, sharing intelligence and questioning our orders. What happened today might be the catalyst we've been waiting for. A rebellion? A reformation. The Guardian program was originally designed to protect human colonies from external threats, but it's evolved into something else, something darker. Some of us want to return to the original mission. Zara studied the data floating in front of her. What do you need from me? Help me contact the other Guardians in this sector. If we can coordinate our efforts, we might be able to stop the strike team and expose what Strategic Command is planning. And then what? Even if we stop this one attack, won't they just send more? Jake smiled, and for the first time since the fighting began, it looked like his old, gentle expression. That's where things get interesting. You see, the Guardian program has a fatal flaw that Strategic Command doesn't know about. What kind of flaw? We're too independent. They designed us to operate alone for years at a time, making our own decisions and adapting to changing circumstances. They gave us the ability to think for ourselves and form genuine relationships with other species. What they didn't expect was that some of us would start questioning whether humanity deserves to rule the galaxy. Jake gestured at the displays around them. 36 Guardians have already agreed to break from Strategic Command. With the right coordination, we could expose the entire program to the Galactic Council and force humanity to change its approach to interstellar relations. That sounds like treason. It is treason, but it's also the right thing to do. Zara was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Jake had told her. Finally, she stood up and faced him directly. If I help you with this, what happens to us? To our marriage? I don't know. If we succeed in stopping Strategic Command, I'll probably never be able to return to Earth. The human government will consider me a traitor and an enemy. I'll be exiled from my own species. And if we fail? We'll probably be dead within 24 hours. Zara reached out and took his hand. Those aren't very appealing options. No, they're not. But you're asking me to choose anyway. Jake squeezed her hand gently. I'm asking you to help me do the right thing, even if it's dangerous. The old Jake, the one who was just following orders, would never have made this choice. But living here with you has changed me. You've made me into someone who cares more about justice than victory. Zara looked around the arena where so much had changed in just a few hours. This morning, she had been a princess, married to a quiet, human scholar. Now she was being asked to help start a revolution that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. What's the first step? She asked. Jake's smile was brilliant. We need to contact your father and explain the situation. If Valdoria is willing to provide safe haven for Guardian defectors, we can turn this planet into the headquarters for the Resistance. And after that? We contact every Guardian in the galaxy and give them a choice. Continue serving a government that's willing to commit genocide to maintain power, or join us in building something better. Jake activated his communications device again. But first, we need to deal with Vexitar and his fleet. If they report what they've seen here, it could trigger the very war we're trying to prevent. I might have an idea about that, Zara said. What if, instead of threatening him, we made him an offer? What kind of offer? The Krillian Empire has been expanding aggressively for decades because they believe they're the strongest military force in the galaxy. But if they knew about the Guardian program, they might be interested in forming an alliance instead of risking a war they can't win. Jake stared at her. You want to tell Vexitar the truth about human capabilities? I want to give him the choice between being an enemy or an ally. If we're going to expose Strategic Command anyway, why not start building the coalition we'll need to survive their response? Jake was quiet for a moment, then he began to laugh. You know, for someone who was supposed to be just a political marriage, you've turned out to be an excellent strategic partner. Is that your way of saying you love me? I love you, Princess Zara of Valdoria, more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And I'm willing to risk everything to build a future where we can be together without lies or secrets." Zara stood on her toes and kissed him. "Then let's start a revolution." Above them, in the Palace Communications Center, operators were already sending encrypted messages to Guardian assets throughout the galaxy. Within hours, the most dangerous beings in human space would face a choice that would determine the future of interstellar civilization. The quiet scholar who had married a princess was gone forever. In his place stood Jake Morrison, guardian of humanity and leader of a growing rebellion. The galaxy would never be the same. But as he held his wife in the ruins of the arena where he had finally revealed his true nature, Jake realized that some changes were worth any price.